PSG's defense is probably the part of the team where the most is happening right now, tactically, individually, and on the transfer market. Luis Enrique is still shaping his backline, experimenting with the three-man structure. Zabarnyi is adapting. Beraldo still poses a lot of questions. Pacho just extended. And new names keep appearing like Upamecano, Eric Garcia, or Daniel Muñoz as Hakimi returns from injury and gets ready for AFCON. So today, instead of listing news, we're connecting all the dots to understand the big picture, where PSG's defense stands today, what it's missing, and where it's heading next. So let's talk about this because, I think like the defense is really the part of the team where the most work has been happening this season. And, not all of it is coming together. I think there's a lot of different strands. We keep hearing rumors and names, and there's players who perform and players who don't. So I think it's kind of interesting to take a step back and try to connect the dots, entangle fact from fiction as much as possible. I'll bring you up to speed on what I'm hearing and my vision of it all. And I think, to start with, let's start with the tactics. Because if you're Luis Enrique, this is really like where you eat and the core of the question. I think last season, what we saw was a back four that would evolve into a back three on the offensive phase at the beginning of the season, only because Hakimi was allowed to move forward. That was the whole time of Nuno Mendes has to stay back. And then towards the end of the season, Nuno Mendes also got to move forward. And so there were compensation needed in terms of a player taking that third spot in defense. And that's what we saw a lot with Fabian Ruiz and Vitinha typically covering for Nuno Mendes, which, worked most of the time, but still sometimes created trouble, just like in the Club World Cup final. And so that's kind of where we started this season. And I think what we saw a few times this season is Luis Enrique playing with three central defenders. And typically that happens when Nuno Mendes doesn't play and he gets replaced by either Beraldo or more often Hernandez. And you get a back three of, any combination of Hernandez, Beraldo, Pacho, Marquinhos, Zabarnyi playing together and covering the back with a right full back, who then, like, whether it's Hakimi or Warren Zabarnyi, has a lot more opportunity to move up and stay up on the pitch. And so in the end, we look like a 4-3-3 out of possession, but most of the time in possession, a 3-2-5. So a very, very offensive kind of system. But still, pretty much along the same lines as where we were last season. The question mark, though, is that 3 at the back, it's very, very different. Obviously, it means that we do without... a weapon like Nuno Mendes, but also it's brought into question the limitations of some of our players, and I think in particular, Zabarnyi on the right has been a big question mark in terms of his performance, and we'll get to that individual case. So I think it's interesting because it does answer that question of what do we do and how do we keep enough strength in defense so that any team that tries to counterattack us very, very quickly and very directly still has enough at the back to deal with, instead of us having to rely on our midfielder doing the job. But I think in terms of balance, it does create different question marks. Personally, I think that, it does tend to improve our defensive solidity, but it limits our options. It decreases our strengths up front, and decreases the powers that we had on the wings, which was really a big strong point of PSG last season. So I don't know. I'm not entirely sold on it yet at this point. It doesn't help that the games that we've seen with this haven't been always like the most successful of all. So I'm thinking of Marseille in particular, which was really meh in my mind. And so, yeah, I think there's still a lot of work. I do respect, though, that like it's a typical Luis Enrique modus operandi as well. It's like he starts the season with things that he tries left and right, progressively tries different players in different positions, moves things around, and then progressively, as we go towards the second half of the season, all of those experiments tend to fall into place. He like takes out what doesn't work, and just like is left with the things that they've managed to really build on. So right now we're in the phase where typically like that's when we see the things that don't work. It doesn't mean that they're going to be, they're going to keep happening throughout the season. So we'll have to be patient, and ultimately, like maybe it's the kind of system that moves us from losing in the final of the Club World Cup to winning a game like this. So you don't know if that's going to be the difference maker later in this season. But I think right now, tactically, for me, like I'm still not feeling great about this. And I think, a lot of it comes down to the player. I kind of hinted at that. I think the three at the back system doesn't necessarily suit the skill sets and the kind of attributes of some of our players. So when I see Zabarnyi on the right in particular, I think it's really the one where it's been problematic. I think Zabarnyi, I know there's a lot of question marks and debate among the fans on how he's doing in PSG. I think overall, like my personal appreciation is that he's going through a phase of adapting to this PSG team and the way we play and the structure and the partners and so on, which is, not easy. And for quite a few players, it takes a while. I think I've got more faith and more confidence in Zabarnyi than I do in Chevalier, for example, because I think Zabarnyi, like we've seen him produce big games in a couple of points. And I'm thinking, for example, of the game in Barcelona, where Zabarnyi honestly had a very good performance. So that's that gives me confidence that he knows how to do it. He's got the talent and the skill, and just in terms of putting all of that in the right context and making sure that he works well with the rest of the team, with the partners, and with the tactics. And I think in that context, like having him on the right of a back three, typically, it's like it puts him very, very close to the touchline on the right, and typically like puts him face to face 1v1 against like opposite side left wingers. And the problem with that wingers typically are players who are very technical, very fast, very nimble. And Zabarnyi is a very bulky, very solid, very physical kind of central defender. And so we've seen it a few times already that if you put opposite him a player who's fast and he can like make runs, especially if he has a lot of space to cover in his back, you're creating problem for him essentially. And so I think for me in the long run, wouldn't be surprised to see him move to the central position of the back three, where I think he might be more able to stand further back, to like do the fighting with the opposition team striker, and so it might be a position that works better for him. And I think at this point, having maybe Marquinhos on the right, Pacho on the left, Zabarnyi in the middle, I could see that happening. I think it'd be strong. I think Pacho on the left. Also, like there's been a couple of question marks, a couple of points where like he moves to the left and it's not really like the strongest Pacho ever. So we'll have to see how that evolves. Marquinhos also has been up and down, and obviously like the return from injury in his game against Bayern, I've lit up a lot of red lights for a lot of people. For me, like I've got nothing but love and respect for Marquinhos. So I'm not gonna say anything negative about him. I think it's just a matter of fitness and coming back to the top of his game, and we'll see what happens after that. But yeah, I think in terms of individual performance, we'll have to see how those fit with the tactical makeup. And the last one I wanted to talk about is Beraldo, and I know like that one as well. Like, how can a defender be so strong technically and with his passing, and yet so bad with like raw defensive attributes? It's amazing to me, and I think candidly, like I really like I'm actually like Team Beraldo. I might be like the last one and the only one. I really like the player. I really like the skill set that he brings. I like the smile and the attitude of him. I recognize the limitation and the flaws, and I recognize, and that's the thing that's really like starting to get to me, is that the improvements are just happening so slowly. Yeah, he's a young player, but he's been with us for more than a couple of years now. He's got to like, and he's getting like really decent game time, so he needs to step up, and he hasn't been stepping up, and it's really starting to be very frustrating. And I kind of like I get that, and I agree with that. At the same time, like the thing that always sticks with me is that if you look at defenders his age who are like less than 21 and getting like this sort of quality, there's really not a lot. So, yeah, sure, you've got like a Garcia in Barcelona, but apart from that, like there's really not that many young central defenders who arrive fully formed at like 21-year-old and ready for the big stage. The reality is that central defense is a position where you need to learn, you need to like be experienced, you need to play a lot, and that's why like central defenders typically reach their prime later on in their career. And so Beraldo, yeah, he's frustrating right now, but he's still super young. So like I want to say that we should give him time and so on. At the same time, we've given him a lot, and we're not seeing it. So yeah, it's frustrating. And I honestly like I don't even me like I don't really know what to make of it. Honestly, like I really don't know. I wish like I could see what he's like in training, because Luis Enrique keeps pushing him and keeps like seeing something in him. So there's gotta be stuff that we don't see. Would be my perspective. But yeah, like he's been a very very frustrating one for this season so far. And so that kind of brings up to the last piece of the defensive revolutions, is that there's so many transfer rumors flying around when it touches to our defense. And that's kind of interesting because this is really, for me, the area of the team where we have enough numbers. We do have positions are doubled, we do have substitutes, we've got youngsters behind that who aren't really getting as much game time as youngsters in attack or in midfield. So my sense that like we do have that. At the same time, we're hearing first like the good news. I've mentioned that in a YouTube shorts. I don't know if you've seen, but Pacho contract extension done, signed until 2030. Not officially announced yet, but every journalist in France agrees that it's done. So that's the great news. Beraldo looks like, and I think the rumor and the word on the street right now is that he'd be keen to move out of PSG come January. And the reason for that is that he's lost in space in the Brazil squad, and there's obviously a World Cup next summer. So he wants more playing time, and he wants to play more regularly and play in the big game. And so in that context, he could be tempted to move out, get a different challenge, and try to get his spot back within the Brazilian squad, so he can play in the World Cup. We'll see if that becomes true. I wouldn't be surprised because I know World Cups are like typically big motivators for people and for players. So we'll see. There were like weird rumors in the summer as well, which ultimately didn't go anywhere. So it's not entirely surprising. And honestly, like yeah, like if he wants to leave, I like assuming we can get our money on him. Like yeah, like sure, like. That's the way it's going to be. Like, we said that we don't want players in PSG who don't want to be there. So if that's the case, then thank you, bye-bye. And that's going to be it. And then, like, to replace him, there's already rumors happening of, youngsters, central defenders, left-footed, including a guy out of Nantes, a 17-year-old who's been playing his first game with Nantes. I don't think this one is real, honestly, because I don't see, like... I think when the player is too young and not experienced enough and not interesting enough yet for us, and I don't see how he would benefit from becoming like the fourth or fifth defender in PSG versus getting some regular playing time in Nantes. So we'll see, but yeah, I don't really believe in this one. At the same time, on the right of central defense, I think Zabarnyi is slowly adapting, and we've seen like good stuff, we've seen bad stuff out of him, but for now he is what he is. Marquinhos, I think like the plan with Zabarnyi coming in was that he would get a year of the two playing together, so Zabarnyi has time to adapt and ramp up and progressively take over that spot, and Marquinhos would move out at the end of the season, which might still be the plan, and that's kind of what it looks like, because there's a lot of rumors about this second right-footed central defender position. So for a while we were hearing a lot about Eric Garcia of Barcelona, who is apparently a player that Luis Enrique likes a lot. He started him in the Spanish national team when he was the coach. He can play in central defense and on the right as well, which is very interesting for us to have this kind of versatility. What we're hearing right now is that the player is getting closer to a contract extension with Barcelona, and so might not be happening. It was interesting because for a while we were even saying like we were initially looking at him as a free transfer next summer, but we would potentially be interested in bringing him in the winter and paying a fee for him for the last 6 months of his contract, which is really a sign of the club being very keen on him. So we'll see, but right now it sounds like that's an option that's decreasing in value as we go. Second one that we've heard a lot about, Upamecano of Bayern Munich. Obviously, like one of the best defenders in the world in my mind, probably like one of the top 5, I would say. Fantastic player who's also coming out at the end of the contract in the summer. There's been conversation with Bayern Munich for the longest time about him extending. If you remember, during the preview of our Champions League game with them, my mate, the Bayern View, was saying that was essentially done and they were just waiting for the announcement. At the same time, we're also hearing that Barcelona, Real Madrid is very keen on the player and very advanced in conversation with him. We're hearing that PSG is part of that as well. I don't really know, because in this sort of situation, I know PSG is always mentioned, either by the player to try to get a better deal out of their club, just because they know that PSG has deep pocket and would pay big money for a player like this, or by the club, so in this case Bayern Munich, to make themselves look good with their fans. And make the player look good with their fans, so that when they announce that he's renewed his contract, it's like, oh, look at that, he's turned down the money of PSG because he loves us and he commits to us and so on. Sometimes completely made up, but more of a PR move than anything. So we'll see. Honestly, obviously, wouldn't say no to that. I'd be super shoved with it. He's just world-class defender. I think there's a lot of competition. I do wonder how it would play with our new contracts and wage bill and so on. But if we can bring him on, let's bring him on. And then the last one I wanted to mention as well, because we've heard a lot about this one as well. Daniel Muñoz, who's a right fullback in Crystal Palace, 29-year-old Colombian, I think. And it's been mentioned as a target of PSG. Honestly, the rumor originated from dodgy Spanish website Fichajes. I don't even know how to pronounce that. With no source to it, they don't really have a track record of knowing anything about PSG. So it really sounded like a completely fake rumor. The agent of the player mentioned recently that they've been approached by emissaries of a lot of top clubs, potentially including PSG, but no offers has been made. Honestly, I don't buy it at all, because a right fullback who's 29-year-old doesn't sound at all like what we typically do right now. If he had been 19, I'd believe it a lot more. But also Hakimi, regardless of the injury, regardless of AFCON, is going to be back with us mid-January. And so the earliest you could recruit this player would be 1st of Jan. And so essentially Hakimi being the physical machine that he is, and fingers crossed that he's not entered a scenario where he's going to go through injury after injury because he's being pushed back for AFCON. But you could be looking at recruiting a player for 30 million euros to play for 4 games, and then Hakimi comes back and he just plays a couple of games here and there. So sure, we're not talking about a tier 1 talent, so maybe he could be interested in this. But honestly, it feels very far removed from the way we're looking at this position and the way we've been looking at transfer. It's an older player, which we don't really do anymore. I really have a very, very hard time believing this one. So we'll see. But I personally, I don't put a lot of stock in it. So anyway, this was the broad overview of where we are with our defensive revolution or evolution. A lot of things, a lot of work streams in progress, a lot of things happening. So let's see how things continue. I think tactically the next 8 games between now and the end of the year are going to be very interesting to see how the team develops without our 2 fullback. And then the transfer window in January is also going to give us a lot of indications in terms of what does the future look like for our backline. And in any case, I'll keep you guys posted. If you make this far into the video, please drop a like. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. And let me know what you think of our defensive stuff this season. And which player would have you most excited if they were to join in. And as always, ici c'est Paris!